She was supposed to just call the match. Instead, she set the entire tennis world on fire. Moments after Alex Eala walked off the court in silence, broadcaster Valérie Tétreault said something no one saw coming. Something that made players, fans, and even rival commentators stop mid-sentence. What she revealed wasn't just commentary. It was a confession, an accusation, and a warning, all in one breath. And once you hear it, you'll understand why nobody in the tennis world can stop talking about it. The stadium lights felt heavier than usual that night, as if the entire arena knew something was about to shift beneath the surface of an ordinary match. Alex Eala, the rising star everyone had bet on to finally break through to the top tier, walked onto the court with the same calm focus she always carried. But something in her eyes told a different story to those who knew how to look closely. From the very first serve, the rhythm felt off. Her footwork, usually sharp and calculated, hesitated at moments that mattered most. Commentators in the booth exchanged quiet glances, sensing that this was not simply a bad day at the office. Point by point, the match slipped further from her control, and the crowd that had come expecting a triumphant display instead witnessed a slow, painful unraveling. By the second set, whispers had already started spreading through the press section. Questions about fatigue, about pressure, about whether something behind the scenes was affecting her performance far more than anyone on camera could see. Valérie Tétreault, seated in the broadcast booth with decades of experience reading players like open books, grew unusually quiet during the changeovers, her usual sharp analysis replaced by long, thoughtful pauses that unsettled her co-host. Viewers at home began commenting online that something felt different about tonight's coverage, that the tone in the booth had shifted from excitement to something closer to concern. When Alexa finally lost the deciding point, there was no dramatic collapse, no visible tears, just a stillness that felt heavier than any outburst could have been. She shook hands, gathered her bag, and walked off court in a silence that somehow spoke louder than any post-match interview ever could. The audience, both in the stadium and across streaming platforms, sensed that this defeat was not the end of the story, but merely the opening chapter of something far bigger. Reporters scrambled toward the tunnel hoping for a statement, but Alexa offered nothing beyond a brief nod and a faint, unreadable smile. It was in that vacuum of silence, in that absence of explanation, that all eyes turned back to the broadcast booth, where Valérie Tétreault sat staring at her notes, visibly wrestling with whether to say what she was thinking. The tension in that booth became the real story of the night, more compelling than the scoreline itself, because everyone watching could feel that something was about to break. And when the broadcast returned from commercial, nothing about Valéria's expression suggested business as usual. She looked directly into the camera, took a breath, and prepared to say the words that would soon dominate every tennis headline across the world. When Valérie Tétreault finally spoke, her voice carried none of the polished neutrality broadcasters are trained to maintain, and instead trembled with something closer to raw honesty than professional commentary. She began by saying that she had covered tennis for over 15 years and had never once felt the need to step outside her role as an analyst. But tonight, she explained, silence would have made her complicit in something she could no longer ignore. The booth fell quiet as her co-host leaned back, clearly caught off guard by the direction the broadcast was suddenly taking. Valérie described patterns she claimed to have noticed for months, subtle signs in Alexa's body language, hesitations before certain serves, and a heaviness in her shoulders that had nothing to do with physical fatigue. She spoke carefully but firmly about the pressure young athletes face behind closed doors. Pressure from sponsors, from expectations, from a sport that often demands perfection while offering little room for vulnerability. Though she never named names or made direct accusations against any single individual, her tone made it clear she believed larger forces were at play. Forces that had quietly worn down a player capable of so much more. Fans watching live began flooding social media within seconds, dissecting every word, replaying the clip, and debating what exactly Valérie meant by phrases like, "Enough is enough," and "Someone needs to be held accountable." Sports journalists who had built careers analyzing athlete performance suddenly found themselves analyzing a broadcaster instead, trying to determine whether her comments were spontaneous or carefully planned. Former players began weighing in publicly, some praising her courage for speaking honestly about the hidden pressures of professional tennis, others cautioning that speculation without full context could unfairly damage reputations. Alexa Milan's team remained silent in the immediate aftermath, declining to confirm or deny anything Valérie had suggested, which only intensified public curiosity even further. Within an hour, clips of the broadcast had been viewed millions of times, with hashtags referencing the moment trending across nearly every major platform. What made the moment so powerful wasn't dramatic shouting or scandalous accusation, but the quiet conviction in Valéria's voice, the sense that she had reached a breaking point after years of watching young athletes struggle in silence. Longtime viewers noted that they had never seen her this emotionally invested in a broadcast before, which only added weight to her words. As the night wore on, it became clear that this moment had shifted from a simple post-match reaction into something the entire tennis community would be forced to address, whether they wanted to or not. By morning, the clip of Valérie Duchamp's comments had become the single most discussed moment in tennis media, eclipsing even the match result itself in terms of public attention and debate. Sports talk shows opened their broadcasts with the footage, pausing it frame by frame to analyze her expressions, her word choices, and the visible emotion she had struggled to contain. Analysts who normally focused on technical breakdowns of serves and rally patterns instead spent entire segments discussing mental health in professional sports, using Valéria's comments as the launching point for a much larger conversation. Current players began posting cautiously worded statements online, many expressing support for Alexa without directly addressing what Valérie had implied, careful not to inflame speculation while still acknowledging the pressures every athlete on tour understood far too well. Retired champions, freed from the constraints of active competition, spoke more openly, some admitting that they too had experienced similar moments of quiet struggle that went unnoticed by fans focused only on wins and losses. Meanwhile, tennis governing bodies faced mounting pressure from journalists, demanding to know whether player welfare protocols were being properly enforced behind the scenes, questions that had rarely been asked so directly before this moment. Fan communities split into passionate camps, with some praising Valérie as a rare voice of honesty in an industry often criticized for prioritizing spectacle over athlete well-being, while others worried that her comments, however well-intentioned, might have crossed a line by speculating publicly about a young player's private struggles. Alexa Milan's name topped search trends worldwide, with fans digging through old interviews and match footage, searching for clues that might explain what Valérie had been hinting at. Sponsors connected to both the tournament and to Alexa herself reportedly began internal discussions about how to handle the sudden wave of public scrutiny, wary of appearing indifferent to athlete welfare concerns now dominating headlines. Meanwhile, Valérie herself declined further comment when approached by reporters outside the venue, stating only that she stood by what she had said and hoped it would encourage more honest conversations within the sport. That restraint, rather than quieting the story, only deepened public fascination, as audiences interpreted her silence as confirmation that she knew more than she was willing to share publicly. By the following evening, think pieces analyzing the moment had been published across major sports outlets, each offering a different theory about what exactly had driven a respected, measured broadcaster to break from her usual composure so dramatically on live television, and what it might reveal about the hidden cost of chasing greatness in professional tennis. As speculation reached a fever pitch, those closest to Alexa Milan began offering carefully measured insights that, while not confirming every detail of Valéria's comments, painted a picture of a young athlete carrying far more weight than the public had ever realized. A former coach, speaking anonymously to protect ongoing relationships within the sport, described the immense pressure placed on breakout stars once they reach a certain level of visibility, explaining that expectations often multiply faster than support systems can adapt to meet them. Training partners recalled subtle shifts in Alexa's demeanor over recent months, moments where her usual enthusiasm for the sport seemed replaced by quiet exhaustion that she worked hard to hide from cameras and interviews alike. Sports psychologists, invited onto various programs to provide expert context, explained that athletes at Alexa's stage of career often face a uniquely isolating kind of pressure, caught between proving they belong among the elite and protecting a sense of identity outside of competition. These broader conversations gave weight to Valéria's earlier comments, suggesting that whatever she had noticed was likely part of a pattern recognized by others within the sport's inner circles, even if few had been willing to say so publicly before now. Meanwhile, longtime fans began revisiting old broadcasts, noting how Valéria's tone toward Alexa had grown steadily warmer and more protective over the past year, hinting that this moment may have been building for far longer than a single match. Some pointed to subtle comments Valérie had made months earlier, seemingly casual at the time, that in hindsight appeared to foreshadow her growing concern for the young player's well-being. Others speculated that a private conversation between the two women, whether formal or incidental, may have influenced Valéria's decision to finally speak out, though nothing was ever confirmed publicly. Alex's silence throughout this entire unfolding story only deepened public sympathy, with many fans expressing hope that she would take whatever time she needed away from the spotlight without facing criticism for doing so. Meanwhile, tournament officials issued a brief statement acknowledging the importance of athlete mental health without directly referencing the situation, a response many critics felt fell short of the moment's significance. As the story continued dominating headlines, it became increasingly clear that this was no longer simply about one match or one broadcaster's comments, but about a sport confronting uncomfortable questions it had long avoided. What began as a single emotional moment on live television had opened a door that many within tennis seemed both relieved and terrified to finally walk through, unsure of what full honesty might reveal about an industry built on relentless competition and public performance. In the weeks that followed, what had started as a single, unscripted moment in a broadcast booth evolved into something far more significant than anyone, including Valérie Tétreault herself, could have anticipated when she first decided to speak from the heart. Tennis organizations, facing mounting public pressure, began announcing new initiatives focused on athlete mental health support, citing the broader conversation sparked by recent events as a catalyst for change that had been overdue for years. Alex Eala eventually returned to the public eye, not through a dramatic press conference, but through a quiet, heartfelt statement thanking fans for their patience and expressing gratitude for those within the sport who had spoken up on behalf of athletes who often feel unable to voice their own struggles. She never directly confirmed every detail Valérie had implied, but her words carried a warmth and honesty that suggested the broadcaster's instincts had not been far from the truth. Valérie, for her part, continued her broadcasting career with the same professionalism she always carried, though many noted a renewed sense of purpose in how she approached conversations about athlete well-being moving forward. Fans who had once debated whether she overstepped her role gradually shifted toward viewing her moment of honesty as a turning point, one that encouraged other commentators and analysts to speak more openly about the human side of competitive sports rather than focusing solely on statistics and outcomes. Interviews with young players on tour began incorporating questions about mental health and support systems, a shift many credited directly to the ripple effect created by that single emotional broadcast. Sports media outlets reflected on the moment as a reminder that behind every scoreline and highlight reel exists a human being navigating pressures the public rarely sees, and that sometimes it takes one brave, unscripted moment to shift an entire industry's perspective. Alexa and Valérie were later seen exchanging a warm, genuine embrace at a subsequent tournament, a small gesture that spoke volumes to fans who had followed the story from its earliest, most uncertain moments. Neither woman offered extensive public commentary on that interaction, allowing the moment to speak for itself in a way that felt fitting given how the entire story had unfolded. What remained long after the headlines faded was not scandal or controversy, but a lasting shift in how tennis, and perhaps sports in general, approached conversations about pressure, silence, and the courage it takes to finally speak the truth. In the end, Valérie Tétreault's bombshell wasn't about blame or accusation, but about compassion breaking through professional silence. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful words are the ones spoken not for headlines, but for someone who simply needed to be seen. If you enjoyed this latest tennis update and want to stay ahead of the biggest stories in the world, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to World Zone right now. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment of the action. See you in the next video.